Today's episode is a conversation about words. I am joined by Allie Michelle, writer, poet, and 3 times best-selling author, whose work has touched millions of people through its honesty, softness, and emotional depth. Her writing feels less like something you simply read, and more like something you experience in the body. In a world that constantly asks us to move faster, perform more, and harden ourselves to survive, Allie's words offer something radically different. Presence, tenderness, reflection, and permission to feel. In this conversation, we explore the power of storytelling, the relationship between creativity and embodiment, the role of silence in the creative process, and what it means to remain soft in a loud world. We also speak about writing as a form of healing, the invisible parts of becoming another, and the connection between breath, the nervous system, and creative expression. This episode feels like an exile. So wherever you're listening from, I invite you to slow down, settle into this moment, and enjoy this beautiful conversation with Allie. Welcome, Allie, to the podcast. I am so excited to have you right next to me while we are in Los Angeles.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. I feel like this is a long time coming.
So, Holly, we're going to jump right into it. And I wanted to start this podcast asking you, when you hear the phrase, the power of words, what does it mean to you today?
Words are some of the most uniquely potent magic that we have as humans. We've been storytellers for so many generations, and it's our way of relating, and it's our way of healing, and it also can cause harm and pain, and it is capable of anything. Like the right words can act as a prison, and they can also act as a key.
You often write about softness and strength existing together. How does it live in you right now?
Softness is my nature. That's my default setting. But right now, I'm working on the strength. I'm about to walk across Spain on the Camino de Santiago. And so I saw this poem the other day, and it said there are 2 kinds of courage. There's the kind where you need to suit up and go into battle. And then there's the kind where you need to strip everything away and be vulnerable. And so I feel like I'm working on the suiting up for battle piece.
Well, actually, we're gonna jump right into that that adventure that you're taking yourself into. That was actually not the plan, but I feel like we need to talk about it because actually, I feel like there must be a huge connection between what you do every day as a writer, as an artist, and because that's a big decision that you're making. So, can you just tell us more about the intention behind?
Yeah, it's a poetry and walking retreat, and it's the famous pilgrimage in Spain. And I just wanted a rite of passage, and I wanted to do something really hard because there's a comfort crisis right now. And the problem with convenience and comfort is it slowly but surely dulls our spirit. And so to have 10 uninterrupted days, not on my phone, just being with people, writing in old churches, and pushing myself over my edges, it just felt like a very important initiation.
Can you take us back to the moment you first realized that writing was more than just expression, but a path? Because I feel like there is a beautiful parallel between that adventure, that walk that you were taking in Spain, and how words and writing is not just, like a job or a task that you get to do every day, but more as something that is a part of who you are and what you do every day.
It's interesting. Initially, words and stories were my shelter as a kid. Like that was how I survived, was I would go and I would live these stories. And now as a writer, I'm coming to understand the responsibility that artists hold, because I used to think of art as a luxury, but it's really not. We're like paramedics for the human soul. And right now, there's so much apathy and disconnect from the heart. And what happens when you're disconnected from the heart? The world starts to look the way that it does right now, very fast and rapid, and without understanding of what our ripple effect is. And so the right poem or song can reconnect someone to that place.
And it's interesting that you're sharing this because actually we had coffee right before recording this episode, and I was asking you how do you feel being on social media, which I think is it's a beautiful way to connect with people and to get inspired and to express yourself in so many ways, but it's also sometimes something that really disconnects you because like there is so much information that sometimes you get to lose yourself and not actually losing clarity on your past. So you are online, you are using Instagram and social media. Did you find a great balance so that you're protecting your inner peace and you're protecting your identity, but also being online, or do you struggle right now?
I struggle. I've always struggled with it. It's hard to find a healthy balance with something that is programmed to be addictive. It's hard to have an off button. And I think that is one of the benefits of having a clear job with a set time is when you're off, you're totally off, versus when you work for yourself, it's 24 hours. And so what's actually helped me is training for the walk, because that's 4.5 hours every single day that I'm not on my phone and I'm outside in the sun and I'm just walking. So this is the most healthy I have felt with it. And yet still I open the app, I post, and I just feel myself shrivel up like a raisin. So it is what it is. I'm grateful to have a place to connect with community and also express my art. And it's anxiety inducing.
Do you actually find enjoyment and actual appreciation creating for the online world, or do you, because I do love creating the content, but it's the moment where you have to share it, which is kind of weird because you kind of create somehow in order to inspire and to lift people up, especially like same, like when you're writing poems and you want to express things through words. My question would be, do you enjoy the process more, or do you enjoy the moment where you get to share, or do you see this as a whole?
They hold different meanings for me. First and foremost, the best I ever feel is writing alone in my room without anyone's gaze. And that's the most whole that I feel. But sharing the art and starting to see someone find meaning in a poem and find their own relationship and feel seen, that feels like an act of service. And it's a really different kind of feeling. But I think the problem is the consistency that's demanded, because artists, they need time to be in their own experience, to be in the mundane and to grieve and to love and to find joy and to live, and then understand what that means for themselves, let it ferment, and then share it. And social media is not built for that cycle. It's built for everyday usage. And so it's hard to allow that space for those seasons while also maintaining a job and a career in that sense.
You started as, I believe, a writer in your own room without no one to see it, I believe, as a passion. What did your relationship with writing look like before it became your work? And also, at one point, did you decide, or maybe the writing decide for you, that it would become your job?
It still doesn't feel like my job. It feels like my way of connecting to life. It feels like my way of loving the world. It never feels like something I'm paid to do. And so actually the meaning of it has only deepened. Like when I first started out, I was either just writing for fun or kind of borrowing the voices of my favorite writers, as we do when we start out with a craft. We mimic our heroes. Now, the possibility of what stories can do has only expanded for me. So I'm happy that I picked something that is always changing. There's always a new character to create, there's always a new plot to craft or a poem to write. And I think it'll continue to evolve throughout the rest of my life.
Was there a moment on your past as a writer where you had to choose, or you felt like you had to choose between getting back to a more classical job, or because I believe there is some sort of uncertainty in being a writer. Did you feel pulled to go back to a safer option at some point, or have you always been in that trusting mode of I'm trusting that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing and I want to stay true to myself?
For better or worse, I've never known anything but uncertainty and the unknown financially. I started volunteering at a suicide hotline, and then I went from that to travel journalism, and it just evolved from there. But I've never had a job that's like, here's your health insurance. This is exactly how much you'll make this year. And so my whole life has been built off of the unknown. And it's kind of what I told you earlier. I've always just done whatever I had to do to be able to write and to make it work. And that doesn't mean that my writing always provided for me, but I always made sure I had time to provide for my writing.
I would love to ask you a question that I'm sure a lot of people ask themselves about the creativity process, because I feel a lot of people are disconnected from their creative spirit. Well, I don't think creativity is something that you create. I think we were all born as creative people, but just being disconnected from that space. What's your creative process like when it comes to writing, but even like, I don't know, maybe if you're painting or doing even yoga, because I know you practice yoga and movement in general. What's your process like? Where do your words usually begin? Is it an emotion? Is it something that you see through your window, silence, experience? Where does it start?
I've come to believe that inspiration is a state of awareness. And the more present I am, the more here I am, the more I notice just how much there is to be inspired by. And sometimes it comes from a strong emotion. I have a lot of poems like that where it feels necessary to write them because it is a weight in my heart that needs to be released. And then there are other times where I'm just observing people and observing the world around me. And the same way you would take a photo of something you find beautiful, I want to write about it and capture a bit of that beauty.
It's funny because I was actually chatting with a student about the process of creating a post online, and she was like, I create a certain time during my week where I'm going to sit and I'm going to prepare my post. And I told her, for me, it's impossible to do that because I do not control my creativity. When I have a creative idea, it just pops. How is it for you? Do you actually create a specific moment during your days or during your week where you're like, okay, Haley, I'm gonna sit during that time and I'm gonna write a poem, or are you more spontaneous?
I used to be spontaneous, but being a working writer, when you start to have deadlines, that becomes a luxury. Um, and what I found was in being consistent and in showing up for the art started to show up for me back, where even if the muse is taking a nap, I'm still going to write. And I had to have that kind of shift in myself of, okay, it's you and me. Like I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to sit here until the story comes out. And there are some days where it flows really easily, and there are other days where I'm arm wrestling my muse. But I do think that devotion holds the floodgates open for that inspiration to come through.
And when actually you're in those days where you're struggling connecting with your creativity and with that inner muse, I felt it was very beautiful the way you brought that up. Do you have a ritual? Do you have a way of, finding that path inward to connect back to your creativity? Or do you like, I'm pretty sure you do things to reconnect and rekindle that light?
Yeah, I mean the I'm a morning writer, so I got a great piece of advice for writing one time from a screenwriter, and he said, write when the perfectionist in your mind is asleep. So either write late at night or first thing in the morning. Um, and I'm a morning writer, so I just wake up, I've got my coffee, I don't look at my phone on the days I want to have a really good writing session. Because if I'm letting my imagination in before the rest of the world, it's so much easier. And that's really the main requirement is I have to have enough emptiness in me. If I've been staring at my phone for 8 hours a day and driving and just consuming a lot, there's just not as much space for my creativity to come through.
I think, Ellie, you're one of the first person at least that I'm meeting who understands why I'm always switching off my phone in the morning, because I'm also a morning person and I need my movement practice to help me release what needs to be released before I can be available for the world. And whenever you switch on your phone, it's like there is so much noise and there is so much to absorb from the outer world. So if you really want to have self-expression and to be in tune with yourself, I think that you really need to be committed into protecting your inner peace. Like earlier we were talking and I was like, for me, it feels like a battle. So whenever I switch off my phone, I feel so protected. I feel like my emotions are protected. I feel like my thoughts are protected. My creativity is protected. And through solitude, I do find the way back to myself and to my inner voice. What role does solitude plays for you in this process of writing, but perhaps also in your life? Because I know personally I do need solitude a lot to recharge. Is it something that you need?
I need real solitude, not being alone and distracted. And distraction, I think, is like probably one of the greatest battles that we face as artists right now, because I actually wrote a Substack on this, but do you know Rumpelstiltskin, the old fairy tale? It was written a couple hundred years ago, but basically, this woman is sold to a king to be his wife, and he's like, if you don't produce an heir by tomorrow, you'll die at sundown. Fairy tales are always very brutal. And so this little gnome, kind of fairy-like creature named Rumpelstiltskin appears, and he's like, I'll wave my magic wand and give you a firstborn by tomorrow so you can live, but you owe me one favor. And without thinking about it, she's like, of course, of course. And so she lives, she marries the king, they have their kid together, and Rumpelstiltskin returns and says, give me your firstborn, because she gave up something so precious for immediate survival and relief. And I think as artists, it's like, what is the gravity of a book or an album compared to a post? But it's so much easier in the moment to just say, of course, just to get to sundown the next day. And so every day I have to make that choice of, I could write a caption, or I could do the thing that won't give me validation for a very long time, and I can work on my book and not give up my birthright. And so I feel like that is what distraction does, is it slowly but surely chips away at our birthright.
How do you know that a poem is finished? Because you were saying that sometimes it's hard to reconnect to that inner muse and you really have to get into it. How do you know that it's finished? How do you know that this is it?
Poems are a lot easier than novels, because I think I could spend 10 years on a novel and it's still, there's so much more I could do for it. But a poem, it's a bit like a raw heartbeat, and if you polish it too much, it takes the magic out of it. How we were talking about with photos earlier, when you were saying sometimes raw is better, because it helps someone actually feel what that moment was. And if I'm focused too much on sounding clever or finding the most pristine metaphor, it kind of takes the emotional essence out of it. And so I try to actually keep them as close to the original thing as possible.
Is your writing process different when you're writing a novel and when you're writing poems?
Absolutely. A poem, it's so free. I see something or I feel something and I write it down and that's it. And a novel requires so much work because I'm creating people, and they have to be as complex and real and lifelike as a real person in my life. And then I'm creating a world, and I have to remember all the rules to that world. And then there's a plot, and everyone has to change and grow along the way on that plot. And so there's just so much required for it, but that's why I love it, because it's really hard. And as I work on those books, they also work on me.
Oh, that's very beautiful. It's like what you're writing is very healing. I also feel like when I'm teaching, I'm also teaching myself. It's not just teaching the students. Do you have a specific topic that you love writing about? Because I know, like, I love writing. It's obviously just a caption for Instagram, but I do love writing newsletters as well. And usually they're really connected to my own past, my own healing journey. I think our healing journey is endless. It's a lifelong journey to work on ourselves. And I do love sharing bits of where I am at the moment of where I am with the people that can read it. Is it something that you do as well when you're sharing a poem or you're working on a book? You're actually talking about what you're going through, or are you actually trying to disconnect your personal life from your work?
The work has to be deeply personal, but in a way that still protects me. I can post a love poem and you'll have no idea who it is or what happened. And there's a beauty in that because of the anonymity. Other people can feel like that poem belongs to them and think, oh, that's my relationship too. And they can see themselves in it. And then it's not about me anymore. So I think there's a delicate balance between being completely vulnerable and also still protecting the personal details in my life.
Do you feel that the words that we read or that we write create the reality in which we are, or do you think they reflect it?
To me, that is a mystery because there's been so many times where I have written a poem or a chapter in a book, and it's a future moment that I live my way into. And then I reread the piece and I'm like, oh my God, I pulled that from somewhere. So I don't think time works the way that we think it does because it's not like I know in those moments that that is my future, but there's been a lot of times where I'm like, oh, shoot, that wasn't about that at all. That was about this.
Have you ever been surprised of how deeply a sentence or a poem impacted someone? Because, you know, a lot of people share like some quote from your books or from your poems, and then you can actually witness how people receive. You know, like last time I shared those stories of me randomly picking poems and be like, whoa, yes, it hit me. How do you feel actually when you witness people receiving your work and your words?
I feel shocked every time. And then I feel really humbled and honored because that's my main thing that I'm striving for in my craft is to create something honest that people can connect to and find some bit of solace in. And and it still surprises me because it's such a solitary activity where I'm just alone in my room writing these things and then I post the book online and who knows where it lands and sometimes it echoes back and I see a moment of someone connecting to it or I hear a story and it's so meaningful and it makes me so emotional and I also have no idea how to receive it.
Did you have to make the work to kind of, you know, leave the baby to the people who are going to read it? Because it, as you said, it's such a personal process. So it can be so personal that you feel like you actually don't want to share it. And then when people receive it, you're like, oh, I feel seen. Did you have that feeling?
Launching a book is not exciting for me the way everyone always says, are you excited? I'm like, no, this is so emotional because it's so exposing if I do it right. And so I feel this mix of terror and hopefulness and tenderness. And also once the book is out there, it's a common thing amongst writers, but it doesn't belong to me anymore. And so I'm releasing it into the world. I'm literally giving this thing away, which has to happen for me to then have space for something else to come through. But um, it's a really frightening and vulnerable process, honestly. And then the excitement comes later after I've detached a bit and I start to see how it lights up other people. Then I'm like, yeah, the book is out, but it's more of a delayed reaction.
Do you feel that you have a responsibility as a writer, was writing about healing and vulnerability, actually?
I do. And I basically growing up on social media, it's been like a weird, tough push and pull of like displaying an aspect of myself that I know will be accepted or be validated for, or doing the other half of that definition of courage and stripping down all my armor and asking myself, what is going to connect me more deeply to my humanity right now? Because if someone comes to my page and they don't feel that permission slip to embrace their humanity, and instead it triggers something else, not that I have control over that, but I think my work as a writer is to just bring more humanity into every moment.
Do you feel pressured sometimes that you have to write something new? Or do you allow yourself to have that space in between books or in between poems? Like, again, we are speaking about society, that constant need to create more and to deliver more, especially when it's your source of income. Do you feel that pressure? And if you do, how do you protect your creativity from that pressure?
Books are a beautiful thing because I can spend 3 years writing and polishing and allowing something to ferment. And then once it's out, I have so much content, but it's not something I'm posting to feed the Instagram monster. It's something that I had time with in the privacy of my own home that I allowed to really take its time to come to fruition. So right now, I'm posting a lot, but I'm not writing those things for Instagram. Those are poems that I really lived my way into for a long time. And so, again, the good thing about books is once they're out, it's like you have hundreds of pages of things to share, and they've had their time.
How long does it take you to write a book? And we can actually take the example of your latest book, which is a poem book. You can actually talk to us a little bit more about the process of this book, especially. But how long did it take you to write all those poems? How many pages? How many poems?
I didn't want to write another poetry book until I was like older and wrinkled and just, I wanted to just come out like Mary Oliver and be like, here's my whole life. And then this editor from HarperCollins reached out and was like, hey, we'd like your next poetry book. And I thought it was fake. Like, I didn't think it was a real email. So I was like, meh, I'm writing fiction. And she reached out a few more times and we connected. And I was like, okay, well, let me see how many poems I have. And I had about 100. So I submitted those. And then my manager called me and said, where's the other half of the book? They need 200. And I was like, I don't have 200.
This is where we will pause for today's episode. In next week's episode, we continue the conversation and dive even deeper into the relationship between embodiment and creativity, the connection between breath and language, and the way words can become a space of healing, presence, and transformation. If today's episode resonated with you, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss part 2 next week. And if someone came to mind while listening, feel free to share this episode with them. Thank you for being here, and I'll meet you again very soon for the continuation of this beautiful conversation with Allie.